We now come to the second Opposition Day motion in the name of the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Chris Bryant, to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move the motion in my name and in the name of the Leader of the Opposition and honourable friends. Madam Deputy Speaker, nobody seriously doubts that the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games were an enormous success. A beacon for the world, we showed how these things can be done and should be done. From the magnificent opening ceremony with its celebration of the Industrial Revolution and Labour's part in creating the NHS, through to the best attended Paralympic Games ever. Team GB won 29 gold medals, 17 silver, 19 bronze at the Olympics and 120 medals at the Paralympic Games. So many great moments. Mo Farah, Jessica Ennis, Charlotte Dujardin, Alistair Brownlee, Ellie Simmons, Jade Jones, Nicola Adams, Chris Hoey winning his 7th Olympic medal, Victoria Pendleton winning her 3rd, Rebecca Adlington and Catherine Granger winning their 4th medals, David Weir and Sarah Story winning 4 golds each in just one Games. And the very fact that the baton was passed from Labour to the coalition underlined basic British values: democracy, fair play, or as we say in Wales, wara teg, and the rule of law. Great times, but the point of hosting the Games was never just to run a big event. There had to be a legacy. We were spending a lot of taxpayers' money and diverting £675 million of lottery funds away from good causes, including the arts. The total of both Games came to just under £9 billion, so there had to be a legacy. Otherwise, this was just the most expensive party in our history. So we said when we were in government, and when we made the original bid, that we wanted to see millions more young people in Britain and across the world participating in sport and improving their lives. And the coalition reaffirmed this in 2010, saying they wanted to foster a healthy and active nation. That's why Labour set a target of getting 2 million more people in England being active by 2012, and set up a £140 million fund to provide free swimming to the over-60s and the under-16s. In December 2010, the coalition set itself 4 legacy aims: increasing grassroots sporting participation, exploiting opportunities for economic growth, promoting community engagement, and ensuring the development of the Olympic Park after the Games to drive the regeneration of East London. Madam Deputy Speaker, what has happened since? An own goal, frankly, a dropped baton, a belly flop. The primary legacy aim was to increase participation, but in virtually every region of this country and in virtually every sport, this has not happened, quite the reverse. It's striking. The figures are down in the North East, in the North West, in the East Midlands, in the West Midlands, the South East, the South West and the Eastern region. That's 62,100 fewer people participating every week in the North West. That's 72,200 participating fewer in Yorkshire every week. Of course I do.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, but actually, doesn't the decline start before the 2012 Olympic Games? Can't we pinpoint it to the scrapping of the School Sports Partnership, which did such good work in spreading best practice and sport participation across young people in schools?
Well, my honourable friend makes an extremely good point, and I hope the Sports Minister wasn't booing and disagreeing with that comment, because she made the point herself on the 18th of December 2013. So I look forward to the Sports Minister joining us in the lobbies later on this evening. And it's not just about every region of the country either, it's every sport. Non-Olympic sports down. Cricket down 73,200. Squash down 79,900. Olympic sports down 2. Archery down 23,600. Badminton down 119,800. Basketball down 46,900. Football down 121,400. Tennis, table tennis, or whiff-waff, as I think the honourable member who bears some responsibility for all of this has often referred referred to it, down. And most striking of all, the one sport that is equally participated in by men and by women, by boys and by girls, the most popular sport in this country, swimming, down by a massive 818,500. That's 33 out of 45 funded sports have seen a fall or practically no increase at all since the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Of course, I give way.
But further on the point of the schools' partnership, is it not the fact that participation in sport is heavily correlated with deprivation? And we have seen some of the greatest problems in sporting participation in recent years declining in areas of deprivation. And that is exactly where the schools' sports partnerships were doing such a superb job, as they were in my own constituency and in parts of London where space and external space is at a premium, and we have to work very hard to overcome that.
I think we need to rename my honourable friend Mystic Karen, because that's exactly the point that I was going to come on to. She's right. And it's one of the most depressing factors of all of that. Oh, well, I can hear chuntering from the front bench opposite. Yes, it's true that trampolining figures went up a little bit. But you know the problem with trampolining, it always goes back down. And whichever way... Oh, all right.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. Does he not agree with me that in areas of deprivation, one of the major drivers for sports and for sports inclusion is in fact the local council? Given that we've seen such excessive cuts to local councils, is there any, can we wonder at the fact that the sport participation has in fact gone down?
Chris Bryant.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I think I managed to hear another little word there, a little squeak from the Sports Minister. Again, on the 18th of December 2013. I'm sorry, I wouldn't want to malign her, but maybe she'll be able to agree with my honourable friend later on in the debate, because in 2013 she pointed out that it was a disgrace that so many schools had sold school playing fields since 2010. Now, why is that? Because of the problems that local authorities have had. And whichever way you cut these figures, it's a disaster. You might have thought... I will in just a moment, if the honourable member... I've been dealing with the honourable member since I was at university with him, and I know when to give way and when not to give way. He'll just have to wait a little bit longer. Madam Deputy Speaker, you might have thought that the success of the Paralympics might have encouraged more people with limiting disabilities to take part in sport. But one of the major problems is that the figure for people with limiting disabilities taking part in sport has also fallen dramatically by 171,000. Of course, I'm happy... Wait. Yes, I will give way to the honourable gentleman, and then I will, of course, give way to the Minister.
If the sporting legacy from the Olympic Games is as bad as the honourable member says, and I think, by the way, he's completely wrong. As far as I know, there are another 1.4 million people playing sport since 2005 in this country. Can he explain why in London, since the Olympic Games, there's been an increase of 400,000 people playing sport? Is it something to do with the great work that's been done by his honourable friend, the member for Vauxhall, as the Commissioner for Sport in London?
Now, you see, the honourable member... I just warn Conservative members who are enjoying a little moment of Borisomics. The truth of the matter is he likes to elide his little figures. It sounded as if he was comparing light with light, but of course he wasn't. He was comparing 2005 with now. And it's true, we dramatically increased the participation in sport under a Labour government from 2005 to 2010, and it's his lot and his government that managed to destroy that legacy. So the honourable member can try and catch your eye a little bit later, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we'll see whether he can recount better statistics. There's one thing I think we can perhaps all do. We can all congratulate the new Cannes award-winning This Girl Can campaign, something won today. I will in just 1 minute. And you might have thought, of course, that with such campaigns and with all the talk of improving female participation in sport, that the figures for women would have improved too. But unfortunately not. 212,000 fewer women take part in sport every week than at the Olympics, and which is why we've needed such an excellent campaign run by Sport England to try and fix the government's failures. Of course, I give way to the former Secretary of State.
way, and I think he may be being a little selective in his use of statistics, because of course my honourable friend, when he was talking about the 1.4 million extra people who are now playing sport, he was referring quite rightly to the time at which the bid was secured, and indeed in the motion today the honourable gentleman has quite rightly talked about the Olympic legacy starting from well before the Olympic Games itself was staged in London.
I'm sorry, but the former Secretary of State doesn't seem to understand that she's agreeing with praising the Labour government. We had significant success between 2005 and 2010, and I would argue that the success we achieved up to 2012, before she and her government managed to get their hands on it, was significant. The problem is the legacy after the Games, which is entirely on the watch of the Conservatives. And I noted earlier that the Prime Minister kept on referring in Prime Minister's questions to the former government. The former government is his government. They can no longer run away from their own record on matters such as these. But perhaps the most infuriating aspect of all the statistics is what has happened to participation amongst those on lower incomes. In 2005-06, the year that the two honourable members have just referred to, when the bid was won, the number of people on the lowest incomes participating in sport was 27.2% of people. When we left office, it had risen to 27.9%. In the post-Olympic year that we're using as a baseline for most of these debates, 2012-13, participation had risen again to 29.3%. But in the most recent statistics, that's fallen to 25.7%. And who can wonder why it is that those on the lowest incomes are finding it difficult to participate in sport, when it's expensive to take part in sport, when local authorities are under the cost financially, and when many of the services that they've relied on have simply disappeared. And I should say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it's, just in one moment, it's no better in Scotland. The Scottish Government doesn't keep very accurate statistics on sport participation, perhaps for a very obvious reason, but people living beside some of Glasgow's most prominent Commonwealth Games venues are now playing significantly less sport and taking less exercise than they did before the event last year. In particular, many people have complained that the Games felt as if they were intended for posher and better off parts of Glasgow and Scotland than for the people on the very doorsteps where the Games were taking place. Now, I'm going to give way to the honourable gentleman and then I'll come to others.
I'm very grateful. I had the privilege on Sunday of taking part in the Great Knots bike ride. There were more cyclists there than at any point in the event's history. And surely he would recognise, just stepping out onto Bridge Street, the number of cyclists that are making use of cycle roads in London, courtesy of my honourable friend, has increased dramatically. Surely that's a success of the Olympic Games and the Great British cycling team.
Everybody would like to praise Chris Hoey, Bradley Wiggins and the many others who have led by example, and some 46,000, I think, additional people have taken up cycling. There are still significant problems which government needs to tackle and local authorities with them. But that's a small drop in the ocean compared to the overall figures, which have seen significant falls. In Wales, by contrast, Madam Deputy Speaker, the figures are considerably better. Labour-run Wales, of course. 70% of adults participated in sport or physical recreation in the 4 weeks prior to the most recent survey, compared to just 44% in England. Now, the honourable gentleman wanted.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. I really must take issue with the comments he made about Glasgow, particularly since his own party run the council there, and what we've seen is local football pitches, the price of which has gone up by 4 times because of his party's council. That's why it's an issue, nothing to do with the Scottish Government.
Oh dear, the SNP. They always love to find somebody else to blame, don't they? And the truth of the matter is that Scotland is run by the SNP. 80% of local authority budgets in Scotland are determined by the SNP in Holyrood. So when he starts attacking Glasgow Council, he needs to start looking into his own backyard. But that's not all. The coalition said it would ensure the development of the Olympic Park after the Games. Here, there are further legacy worries. So far, the cost of transforming the venue into a stadium ready for football has reached £272 million, £15 million coming from West Ham, £1 million from UK Athletics, £40 million from Newham Council and £25 million from the government. That means that the overall spend on the venue will now top £700 million for the 54,000-seater arena, a considerable amount more expensive per spectator than the £798 million lavished on the 90,000-capacity Wembley Stadium. The project is now over budget by around £35 million, which comes close to the total cost of converting the City of Manchester Stadium after the 2002 Commonwealth Games. Just one moment. This has the feel, frankly, of a fiasco cooked up somewhere between the Mayor's office, DCMS and the Treasury, which is why, in the interests of transparency, I urge the government to publish the full details of West Ham's secret deal as a matter of urgency. And maybe I will give way to the member if he's going to agree with me on this matter. If he's going to agree to me on this matter.
I will agree with you. I will agree with the honourable member on that matter. It was indeed a mess cooked up between the Mayor and the Treasury and the DCMS. It was the Labour Mayor and it was the Treasury under Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown that decided to go ahead with a stadium that was completely unsuitable for the purpose. Will he have the decency to admit this single fact? The economic legacy in East London is absolutely superb. And the sporting legacy in London, and it was called the London Olympics, the sporting legacy in London is that more people are playing sport after the Olympics than were before.
Well, to be honest, I think if the people of East London felt that there had been such an enormous success due to his antics in the Mayor's office, there would probably be more people voting Conservative in the East End of London, whereas I note that there are quite a lot of people sitting around me on this side of the House representing the East End of London. And I note that, and I think the Secretary of State should note, that the honourable member agreed with my call for the publication of all the deals of all the details. Oh, he agreed with me that the government should publish all the details of the deal with West Ham. Now, why has there been? Of course.
I thank you, Moving Way. The Education Select Committee visited East London as part of the inquiry into school sport and the Olympic legacy in 2013, and we warned the government then of the lack of legacy and the fall in participation and physical activity generally. The government in its response acknowledged that, and yet we have still seen a failure. Does he agree that it really should be very worrying to everybody in this country that the government chose to ignore the advice it was given by the committee and its own comments on that committee's report?
My honourable friend makes a very good point, and he too is mystic because it's a point that I'm about to come on to. But I wanted to ask, Madam Deputy Speaker, why this signal failure? Well, first, because the coalition, immediately on coming to office in 2010, abandoned the target of getting more people active. They scrapped the free swimming fund, putting local authorities under real pressure. They sold off school playing fields. They scrapped ring-fenced funding for sports school partnerships, as my honourable friend referred to. They abandoned all targets for PE and sport in school. They've had 4 Secretaries of State in 5 years and 3 sports ministers, all peddling their own preoccupations rather than laying out a clear 10-year strategy for sport and activity. And their lazy, laissez-faire, hands-off attitude to sport has simply wasted our Olympic legacy. And it's frankly very conservative. Remember, Mrs Thatcher didn't only close the mines, she also closed all the Lidos in London as well. It's a fundamental principle of theirs. And how do I know all this? How do I know that this is the fault of the government? Because the Minister for Sport told us so herself. She said the other day, government is in part to blame in that we have got a sports strategy that is very much out of date. 5 years of your government, 7 years of him as mayor, it's all your fault. And they've had plenty of warnings too, as my honourable friend said. The Education Select Committee report of 2013 was absolutely explicit. There is clear evidence that the ending of the school sport partnerships funding has had a negative impact, they said. School sport is too important to rely on occasional efforts at pump priming, they continued. And their starkest warning of all, we believe that the opportunity to realise a London 2012 legacy for school sports has not yet been lost. They said that in 2013. Well, it has now been lost because it was a warning that was ignored. And the Secretary of State's own committee, when he was chairing it, even warned last year, we are very concerned about the lack of communication and cooperation between government departments, which we think presents a serious obstacle to the DCMS in its attempts to deliver the Olympic legacy. And this week, in National School Sports Week, the Youth Sport Trust has said that we are at a critical crossroads where action is needed now to modernise the approach to PE and school sport. Of course.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. I'm sure the Mayor of London is a lover of statistics and will enjoy this one. 71.2% of adults in Brent would love to do more activities, sporting activities, compared to 55% of the country as a whole. But unfortunately, access and opportunity prevents that from happening. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I declare an interest of being the Member of Parliament for Wembley Stadium, where we should have seen a lasting Olympic legacy.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and it's a delight to see her back in her rightful place in this House. There are further dangers ahead, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just take swimming. As I said, the one sport equally participated in by boys and girls. Swimming is the most popular form of activity in this country, 2.6 million people taking part every week. But there are many things that put people off swimming. Communal changing rooms, lack of privacy, tired facilities, never learning to swim in the first place, in particular amongst poorer families, and simply the cost of using a swimming pool. And every member will have heard of problems facing local authorities maintaining leisure centres. Many of us may have had to fight for swimming pools to stay open in our own constituencies. In fact, the number of pools is pretty stable in this country, at round about 5,000 in England alone. But more than half of all local authority pools, as opposed to pools in expensive private members' clubs, were built before 1985 and require significant investment to continue to operate and be attractive to modern swimmers. So there are dramatic challenges ahead of just that one sport to make sure that more people go swimming in the future. So, well, I've already taken one from the honourable member, and I'm sure he'll get an opportunity to speak later, but I've not taken the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful for the honourable member for interrupting his fantasy. Can I perhaps point out that Wimbledon, the local authority with my constituency, have redeveloped all of their swimming pools from this government's house-building premium. So what you're saying is not correct across the country.
No, there are. What I'm saying is perfectly correct. It's straight from the ASA. There are significant problems facing local authority pools up and down the country because a small majority of them were built before 1985 and are less attractive facilities and require significant investment. They're properties that are going to be difficult to maintain. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, of course.
The honourable gentleman just mentioned the fact that in his part of the world things have improved. But he's proven the point of where another issue is impacting on this debate, in that the government have slanted funds away from some areas of the country to other areas of the country, to the extent that in Gateshead we're going to end up having to close a bowling centre, which is a lifeline for hundreds of elderly people, and that's going to close simply because my council has lost 48% of its budget over the last 5 years.
Well, look, I think all honourable members understand the basis of local authority funding, which is that 80% of it comes from Westminster and 20% from the council tax and other forms of funding. And the problem is that most local authorities, in particular in deprived areas where there are many people who absolutely rely for their livelihood and for their condition of living on local authority services for the elderly and protection of children and so on, that in those areas the local authorities are under the cosh and are finding it very difficult to maintain the supposedly non-statutory services like leisure, libraries, and that is having undoubtedly having an effect. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, of course...
I'm very grateful to Honourable. As he will know, the latest Sport England data shows for the last 2 comparable years is quite right. The number of people engaged in swimming did go down, but the number of people involved in athletics, in cycling, in football, in rugby and cricket all went up. What analysis have you made of that reason?
No, as I said earlier, there are 4 sports where it's gone up. I disagree with him on the figures on football, but I'm quite happy to have the row with him about it. But the overall point is that there are fewer people taking part. And we haven't seen a dramatic increase, which is what we had all hoped for. We'd hoped that by spending significant amounts of money and diverting monies from other good causes under the lottery, we would see a dramatic legacy. And that all that leadership that had been shown by elite athletes would bear fruit in terms of a healthier nation, and we haven't seen it. So what are we calling for, Madam Deputy Speaker? First of all, a proper 10-year sports strategy with a particular focus on getting more women involved in sport, on disability sport, and on those in areas of multiple deprivation and on the lowest incomes. I think the Sports Minister agrees with us because she suggested some of this last week. If I'm agreeing with her and she's agreeing with me, it's quite a love-in, but it's all the more reason to support this side of the House at the end of the night. Secondly, a renewed determination to make the Premier League divert more of the proceeds from its broadcast rights to grassroots football, to funding coaches, to kit and to pitches, because football does not belong to those at the top. It belongs to the kids who put up posters in their bedrooms, to the parents who take their kids along every Saturday and Sunday morning and afternoon to play soccer. It belongs to the grassroots, and more of the money should be going down there. Thirdly, immediate action on diverting money from dormant betting accounts and unclaimed betting winnings for grassroots sport across the 45 funded sports. Next, restoration of the 2 hours for sport and PE in school. We used to talk about 5 hours a week. Is it too much to ask? 2 hours in school every week. Next, set up a proper target of 2 million more people taking part in sport. Surely to God we can get more of our country folk engaged in an active lifestyle. And finally, an annual report on school sport, which is brought to Parliament by DCMS, Health and Education, so that we can all agree on the facts, because they'd be brought to the House cross-party. Why does all this matter, Madam Deputy Speaker? Well, first, because a more active nation will be a healthier nation. And a more active nation will see more people physically able to work. A more active nation will see fewer people succumb to long-term debilitating illnesses and fewer people die prematurely. Engaging more people in a healthy lifestyle is the best, the most effective and the most efficient form of healthcare. And if we want to tackle ischemic heart disease, diabetes, stroke, as well as many mental health conditions, we have to build a healthier, more active nation. As Sport England put it, if 1 million more people across the country played sport each week, it would save the taxpayer £22.5 billion in health and associated costs. Sport is an essential aspect of rehabilitation, improving people's sense of self-worth and of well-being. And as the DCMS Select Committee under the Secretary of State's chairmanship put it last year, it is widely acknowledged that one of the major health issues facing the UK is the decline in physical activity by the population, leading to a rise in obesity and associated conditions. So it must surely be a scandal for all of us that we spend more in this country, 3 times more, on weight loss surgery than we do on the Change for Life health campaign. We should be spending more money on preventing obesity than on surgery to tackle it. And I believe, therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we should lead by example. So I make an offer to the Secretary of State. There'll be a London Marathon next year. I'm quite happy to run if he's happy to run.
I'll do it.
Order. The question is, as on the order paper, Secretary of State, Mr. John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I begin by thanking the honourable gentleman for giving the House this opportunity to celebrate not just the fantastic success of the London Olympics and Paralympics in 2012, but also the amazing legacy that this country has enjoyed as a result of them. It is actually right that we should consider it now. We are just over a year away until the Rio 2016 Games, and it is just 3 years, a little more than 3 years, since we hosted the Games in London. There is, in fact, I would say, not a lot in the honourable gentleman's motion with which I disagree. I think it is unfortunate that he adopted some rather snide language which would make it impossible for us to support. But once we take that out, and once we remove the synthetic outrage which permeated much of his remarks earlier, I think there is actually quite a lot of agreement across the House, and that I hope will come out. I certainly agree with how he started his speech, which was when he talked about the enormous success of the 2012 Games. Without any question, they gripped the public's attention, they fired imagination right across the UK. Almost of a surprise and disappointment of some of the detractors and the press, we managed to construct the facilities on time and within budget, and we then had the superb organisation for which congratulations are due to not just Lord Coe and Lord Dayton, but to the thousands of people involved in the Games, both employees and volunteers. And that sent a clear and long overdue message to the world that we can still put on I will come to the Honourable Lady in due course, that we can still put on a magnificent event with a degree of friendliness and good spirit which impressed the whole world and showed that this country is prepared to welcome any visitors to our shores. As far as the sport went, our athletes were outstandingly successful, coming third in the medal tables for both the Olympics and the Paralympic Games. Now, one of the reasons for the original success of our bid was that we did put the question of legacy at the absolute core of our plans right from the start. I can remember going to talk to the Greek minister about the legacy of the Athens Games, where he confessed to us that his main concern was actually getting the facilities prepared in time, and he hadn't even thought about what would happen to them afterwards. That was not the case here. We were always clear that legacy was at the heart of our preparation, and we focused particularly on the legacy of the Games in terms of the regeneration of a particularly disadvantaged area of East London, the legacy of the Games for our economy and the potential boost to our tourism, the legacy for volunteering, the legacy for the lives and the perceptions of disabled people, and also, yes, the legacy in terms of sport, both elite sport and participation and healthy living. And we have made strong progress against all of those five themes. In terms of regeneration of East London, as my honourable friend, the member for Uxbridge, has already referred, we have a secure future now for each of the permanent venues on the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. Nearly 5 million people have visited the park since it reopened 2 years ago, including hundreds of thousands who have been able to swim in the aquatic centre or ride in both the velodrome or on the BMX track. All 8 of those permanent venues have their long-term futures secured, the first time that a host city has managed to achieve that within a year. And in particular, we've secured a long-term future for the Olympic Stadium itself, which has not always been the case for some previous host cities. And I can remember visiting the Olympic Stadium in Athens, where there was grass growing out of the running track. In the next 2 years alone, the Olympic Stadium in East London will host the World Athletics Championships, 5 matches during the Rugby World Cup, including the semi-final, and it will become the permanent home to one of the UK's most famous football clubs. On top of that, the Athletes' Village has been converted into housing, with more than 4,500 people already living in this new community. We should also note that not only will the residents have world-class sport on their doorsteps, they will also have world-class culture. The House will be aware that the Government is contributing towards the cost of a new cultural and educational quarter on the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, Olympicopolis. I'm delighted that it will provide a new campus for my own university, University College London, as well as a campus for the University of Arts of London, and that already Sadler's Wells and the Victoria and Albert Museum have committed to being a part of it. And we are now in discussion with the Smithsonian about their establishing their first permanent museum outside of the United States. I will, of course, give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I'm very grateful. Whilst he's on the physical legacy elements, I just wonder whether he would respond to the request which I've made, which others have as well, that the full details of the deal with West Ham should be made public in the interest of transparency.
Well, he will appreciate that things such as the terms of rent are commercially confidential, and to reveal those may actually jeopardise future negotiations with potential tenants. So I think there are good reasons why that is not possible, but we will, of course, respond to him and set those out in more detail. But just whilst I finish on the physical legacy, I would say also that the transport links to and from the park have had a huge impact on that part of London. And there has also been the economic legacy more generally. There is no question that the Games provided a showcase for British business in construction, in event management, across a number of other sectors, and where other countries have followed suit in Rio, in Baku, and in the Commonwealth Games and elsewhere, it has often been the expertise that we have developed in this country that is now winning jobs and orders for this country across the world. Indeed, the total international trade and investment benefits from the Games and Games Times activity has already exceeded £14 billion, against what was already an ambitious target of £11 billion. The Games were also the opportunity to show off the United Kingdom to the world, and as a result, we're on track to deliver tourism targets of an extra 4.7 million visitors, spending £2.3 billion over a 4-year period. And an evaluation of the legacy benefits from the Games by an independent consortium has estimated that the total economic benefits in terms of UK gross value added will be between £28 billion and £41 billion over the period 2004 to 2020. I will give way, yes.
We would get through this debate a lot better if both sides of the House would stop kidding themselves on that we have any of these benefits in Scotland. This was a Games for London, which were great, by the way. I don't seek to take that away. In fact, the only benefit I can remember was when the Honourable Member for Uxbridge was hanging from a zip wire and all of Scotland laughed. So let's not pretend that these economic benefits came to Scotland. They didn't. They came to London, and that's where it ended.
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman, the economic study which I've just referred to said that the impact on Scotland was a boost to the gross value added between 2004 and 2020 of between £2.3 billion and £2.75 billion, and that it created something between 51,200 jobs and 62,400 jobs in Scotland.
I'll give way to my honourable friend. Thank you. Further to those comments, earlier today I had the honour of visiting ABTA Travel Matters conference, where it was often commented about the legacy of the Olympic Games, including the 33.4 million inbound visitors into the UK last year, many of whom also went to Scotland, and the significant economic benefit from that, and all the tax that was raised from those visits.
My honourable friend is entirely right, and the benefits which we gained from those games have been felt right across the United Kingdom and are continuing to do so. I will give way to the lady.
Indeed, heard much about one region of England, but Wales missed out on several hundreds of millions of pounds of Barnett consequential funding, as well as structural investment and foreign direct investment, both prior to and after the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Can the Secretary of State inform the House what he and his department are going to do to make right this wrong? Secretary of State.
Well, I regret I haven't got the figures for Wales in terms of the economic benefit of the Olympic Games, but I have absolutely no doubt that they are of the same order as that which I've already quoted in terms of Scotland, and I'd be happy to provide them to the honourable lady in due course if I can obtain them from the report. Yes, I'll give way to the honourable.
Thank you very much. I can tell you an economic benefit just in the last couple of weeks, actually in Swansea, a brand new half marathon, which is now in its second year, which is certainly to do with the growth in athletics. And as I ran round the park in my Eastleigh 10K T-shirt, St James's Park, just this week, getting back to running, and there is a new all-party group, hopefully, of people returning to running after the campaign, which I would certainly like to see people, if they're training for the London Marathon, on. But I certainly think innovation is really important alongside the financial benefits, and certainly in Eastleigh, young women coming back into exercise, going to spin class, bringing their babies in carry cots. I think innovation is very important.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm most grateful to my honourable friend, and I'm delighted to hear about what she's been doing to increase sporting participation on a personal level herself. And I absolutely agree with her. I am actually going to come on to the issue of sporting participation in due course. But before I do so, I just want to touch on one or two other aspects of the legacy, in particular the volunteering legacy, which was one of the most extraordinary achievements. The motion is on the legacy of the Olympic Games. This is an absolutely critical part.
Order. I've been very lenient about the way the debate is going, but the honourable gentleman knows that he mustn't make points. No, nor must the other honourable gentleman. Neither of you should be making points from a sedentary position, and especially when the Secretary of State is speaking. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just only point out to the honourable gentleman that the title of his motion is the 2012 Olympics Legacy. So it does seem to me to be relevant to talk about it. And on the question of volunteering legacy, one of the greatest successes of the Games were the 70,000 Games makers who gave up their time and enthusiasm to make the Games as welcoming as they were. They have left a very real legacy. We have seen Games maker-style volunteers at the Rugby League World Cup, the Tour de France Grand Depart, the Glasgow Commonwealth Games, and we'll see even more of the Rugby Union World Cup this autumn. But they've also inspired thousands of others to volunteer in their communities. I'll certainly give way.
I'm very grateful to my right friend for giving way, and it's extremely telling that the Shadow Secretary of State had absolutely nothing to say about volunteering, because he doesn't want to talk about one of the great success stories of the Games and of the legacy. Will my right honourable friend agree with me that actually community-based sports volunteers have a crucial role to play in driving participation in sport? And will he join me in congratulating the independent and charity Join In, which the coalition government set up, that has succeeded in recruiting and retaining over 100,000 volunteers a year since it was set up?
Great legacy.
Well, I'm most grateful to my honourable friend. I absolutely join with him in welcoming that, and I think he's been unduly modest in not taking credit for the part that he played in establishing that initiative. And it is the case that volunteering is continuing, and that many grassroots sports clubs simply would not be able to survive without the efforts of hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers. Like I suspect many honourable members in this House, I will be going this weekend to the rugby club in my own constituency to see the NatWest Rugby Force, which is renovating and working on that club, an initiative which has now been signed up by over 650 clubs. I also want to talk about the Paralympic. I will give way to my honourable friend.
Extremely grateful to my honourable friend. It was my pleasure to take part in a 100k Williams Farm Foods cycle ride in Hornsey in my constituency on Sunday. That follows the Tour de Yorkshire, that follows the Tour de France coming to Yorkshire, and that all follows the Olympics, where volunteers have made such a difference, from elite athletes all the way down to those at the very opposite end, such as myself, riding out on Sunday.
Well, I'm hugely impressed at my honourable friend's sporting participation, like my honourable friend from Eastleigh. And it is undoubtedly the case that there has been a great boost to sporting participation in this House, as we have heard. I'm not sure I'm necessarily going to promise to join the honourable gentleman in his very kind offer, but nevertheless, I am delighted that so much activity is taking place. I do want to talk very briefly about the Paralympics, because they also had a terrific legacy. All right, I'll give way to my honourable gentleman.
Let's move on, because I think while we're still on the legacy, what's he got to say about the legacy for lottery-supported charities who are still hurting from the billions of pounds that were diverted from their activities, who have still got great concerns about how this is going to be resolved? What is he saying to lottery-supported charities who felt they've lost out so dramatically because of the London Olympics?
One of the purposes of the lottery was to support sport in particular, as well as charitable activities, and it did seem to me an extremely good use of lottery money to invest in something which has produced such enormous benefit in many different areas. But it is the case also that the lottery will in due course benefit from some return once the sale of the Olympic Village has gone fully through. But I do want to talk about disabled sport and the Paralympics. One of the greatest moments which I had was to have the opportunity to present flowers to some of the medal winners in the Olympic Stadium during the Paralympics. And the atmosphere in the stadium at that time was quite extraordinary. Over half the population, according to a survey taken the year after, felt that the Paralympics had a positive impact on the way they view disabled people, and nearly 250,000 more disabled people are now playing sport than when we won the bid 10 years ago. Can I now turn to the issue which the honourable gentleman talked to, which is the sporting legacy of the Games? At the elite end, we have already talked about the huge success of Team GB in the games themselves, but we have gone on from that. We are currently sitting 4th in the medal tables in Baku, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Bournemouth East, who attended the opening ceremony in Baku on behalf of the government. As many honourable members know, the England's women's team is now playing in the World Cup quarter-final this weekend, and we wish them every success. We achieved our best ever results at the Winter Games in Sochi. England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland all finished in the top 15 of the Commonwealth Games medal table last year, and we are going to Rio next year in a spirit of optimism of even greater success. The honourable gentleman turned to the question of participation levels, and it is correct that the figures that came out in the recent Active People survey are disappointing. There is no question that one of the prime aims of the Games was to increase participation, and we did achieve that. There was a huge boost to participation after the Games. As already been quoted, over the period since we won the bid, something like 1.4 million people are participating in sport. But nevertheless, I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Very grateful to the Secretary of State. He mentioned in passing the Rio Games next year. The fact that they are now fast approaching, does he see an opportunity to reinvigorate school sport in particular, so that we can get young people active and involved in sport and fired up for the Rio Games?
I absolutely do. And there is no question that the impact of games, both in London and hopefully in Rio next year, on young people, particularly following some of the wonderful role models that have been established right across many different sports, has led to a growing enthusiasm. And actually some of those are not picked up in the Active People survey because they're young people who don't yet come into the statistics for measurement. Yeah.
He's touching briefly on women's participation in sport, but there's a key issue that my honourable friend referred to earlier, which is the fall of... we already had a gender gap of 1.8 million. We've got 200,000 less women taking part in sport. And the only things that have been growing are things like park runs and the 10Ks that his honourable friend mentioned. There's something really serious there when that's the only sport that is increasing.
I agree with the Honourable Lady, which is why the Select Committee, which I chaired in the last Parliament, did an inquiry into women in sport. But as I think the Honourable Gentleman has already alluded to, the barriers to women's participation are very varied, and a lot have to do with image, with embarrassment, with the nature of the facilities available. It is a complicated picture, and certainly it is something which I am keen to see addressed. And I know that my Honourable friend, the Minister for Sport, and there are a few people more qualified to talk about women's sport than she, as a very active participant. But that is something to which we both attach considerable priority. But it is the... I'm conscious that there are many people who have put in to speak in this debate, and therefore I don't want to... I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I congratulate my honourable friend on his compelling speech and in his new position as well. Does he recognise that there's growing support, cross-bench support, for outdoor recreation and the important role that has in physical activity? And does he agree that as we shape a future strategy for sport, a modern sport for the 21st century, that outdoor recreation should be part of it?
Most grateful to my honourable friend. I think the simple answer to the point he raises is yes, we entirely agree with him. There is no question that recreation has a considerable part to play in increasing participation. I'll very quickly give way to my honourable friend.
Can I just make the point that I do think there is a real risk of everyone being a bit negative about the legacy of the Olympics. And in my constituency, Gloucester, what the government has done in terms of rejuvenating the Blackbridge Jubilee Athletics track is making a huge difference in an otherwise slightly deprived ward, and also the funds that have gone towards a brand new Gloucester Rowing Club, which has got some of the best women rowers in the country on the Sharpness to Gloucester Canal, is going to make a significant difference. And I think my right honourable friend should take optimism from...
Fall to my honourable friend, particularly for giving that example, but it is mirrored up and down the country, and he's absolutely right that we shouldn't be negative, because there's a huge amount of progress that we have made and the benefits which are still flowing from the Games. I don't want to speak for much longer, as I know that there are a lot of people wanting to speak in the debate. I would simply, if my honourable friend will forgive me, I do want to now come to an end. I would just say to the honourable gentleman that we share his concern about the figures that came out. That is why my honourable friend, the Minister for Sport, has already announced that we will be reviewing our sports strategy, that we will be looking to adopt a fresh approach and see what more we can do to increase participation. But as my honourable friend has just said, we should not be negative, and therefore I would just like to conclude by quoting the IOC President, Thomas Bach, who said, "Ensuring a positive legacy from the Olympic Games for a host city is very important. That is why I'm delighted to see that our British partners have succeeded in maximising the legacy of London 2012 across a number of different areas. I see that London and Britain have understood that the Games can be a catalyst for positive, long-term economic, social and sustainable legacies." That is the true legacy of these Games. And on that basis, we are not able to support the motion of the opposition.
Deidre Brock.
More and tang, Mr Deputy Speaker, and thank you for this opportunity to give my maiden speech and hopefully inject some notes of calm and good sense in what has been a very robust debate. Because, of course, I am the first woman to rise to speak in this place representing Edinburgh North and Leith, and I believe the first woman to represent any part of my constituency in this House. I'm pleased, therefore, to play my small part in changing politics to make the profile of the population of this place more closely match the profile of the population that we serve. Absolutely. And I am absolutely delighted to represent Edinburgh North and Leith. My immediate predecessor was, of course, Mark Lazarovich, who represented the constituency for some 14 years and was held in high regard by many of my constituents, and I wish him very well in his future endeavours. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, you may have heard in recent weeks a succession of members extolling the virtues of their constituencies and claiming them to be unsurpassed. This can only be because they have not yet visited my constituency. From the elegance of Edinburgh's new town, completed a couple of centuries ago, but still the new town to us, to the shore at Leith, which may have been tamed a little in recent years, but still loudly proclaims its independence from Edinburgh despite the treachery of 1920. My constituency embraces variety, and rebellious spirits are cheek by jowl with more douce residents. It hugs the Forth from Seafield to the Burney Rocks at the foot of Granton, and that relationship with the Firth and the sea has shaped the place. International trade in and out of Leith for centuries meant that our links were well enough established so that when England took the huff with France and banned claret, we imported it in vast quantities and smuggled it into England, keeping the best for ourselves, of course. The people of my constituency have always been inventive and resilient, and those qualities have served us well over the years. But it seems we will need them afresh now. While Edinburgh North and Leith has areas of affluence and more than its fair share of professionals from the legal and financial worlds, it also has areas of poverty and deprivation, and communities full of people whose life experiences are not comfortable. In my few weeks as an MP and in my role as a councillor before that, I have seen people in desperate situations. They face grinding poverty and their hope has been bulldozed from their lives. Mr Deputy Speaker, in 1922, James Maxton rose to make his maiden speech here and talked of the people of Glasgow living in poverty, with the equivalent of benefit sanctions forcing children to the parish council to be fed, just as they are now being sent to food banks. A century on, and it seems little has changed. The voices of the Red Clydesiders would still be regarded as revolutionary in here. Absolutely. The Chancellor recently informed the House that he intends to cut more deeply than he already has, that the austerity orgy would continue. And leaving aside the fact that austerity has never worked, and wherever it has been tried, it has caused long-lasting damage. Absolutely right. And we can perhaps look at the human face of the cuts, the suffering and the misery, and decide that we should decide a different path, that we should choose a different future. In his maiden speech, Mr Deputy Speaker, Maxton said, "We have had many lectures on etiquette, manners and conduct from right honourable gentlemen in all parts of the House and from the press. We admit frankly that perhaps on the nicer points of good form we have different ideas. Our dialect is somewhat different also, and perhaps our mode of dressing is slightly different. But we think it is the very worst form, the very worst taste, that it shows very bad breeding to kick a man who is in the gutter, or to withdraw a crust from the starving child. Now, we've had something similar here in the last few weeks. We on the SNP benches may not have the delicacies of this House's customs and manners perfected, but we too think it is in the very worst form, the very worst taste, that it shows very bad breeding to kick people who are in the gutter, or to withdraw a crust from a starving child. We might have been entitled perhaps to expect that the loyal opposition would have had something to say about the crushing weight that austerity is for the poor. We might have expected a party that was built on a promise of creating fairness in society to consider it had a duty to stand up for those with least. Instead, today we find ourselves with a motion in the name of the interim leader of the opposition that talks of the supposed squandering of the London Olympic legacy. Given the amount of infrastructure spending that was denied other areas of the UK, as we have heard, to be focused on London for those games, some of us may be forgiven for asking whether the legacy in question should be thought of as a positive one. I shall be generous, though, and leave that aside and say that creating the next generation of athletes, elite and otherwise, and to improving the health and well-being of our people cannot be done unless there is investment. Investment in facilities, investment in coaching provision, and investment in society. For a child lacking nourishment is far less likely to perform well at any sport, never mind excel, and a parent queuing up at a food bank isn't really in the best position to encourage their children's participation in sport. And the same really applies to education, health and life chances. Poverty kills hope, kills opportunity and smothers ambition. We have to do exactly the opposite. It seems to me, Mr Deputy Speaker, we stand at a crossroads, a junction of decision, but our duty could not be clearer. We have an obligation to offer hope and ambition. We cannot be the doommongers, the naysayers, the harpies of hardship. We should be lighting the way to a better future for individuals and communities. A broken society, shackled to a future of despair and trying to hold itself together by its fingertips, surely is too high a price to be paying for a marginally improved economic performance now, even if austerity could work. The orgy of cuts must end, and rebuilding what has been broken must start. And that has to begin with investment in our infrastructure, in our public services, and most urgently of all, in our people. No more despair, no more distrust. It's time to invest. I say to members on all sides that we have a chance now to make sure that Maxton is not still relevant in another century, and that there is a different way. Come to Scotland. Find a politics that has been rescued by hope, where people are engaged and talking about the future and about possibilities. And while members are there, take a look at the investment the Scottish Government has made in community facilities through the Cashback for Communities scheme, financed by recoveries under the proceeds of crime. Giving the next generation somewhere to hone their talents, somewhere to get fit and somewhere to respect each other. Come to Scotland and see the difference it makes. And while you're there, come and see Edinburgh North and Leith. It is the best constituency in the country. And I'll show you around. I will let the people tell you that they need more than you are offering, and then you can come back here and make a difference. We members weren't sent here to mark time and hope we get out the other end unscathed. We were sent here to do a job. The people we represent need more from us than we've given so far. They need hope. And the question for each of us in this House is, are we good enough to deliver that hope and to offer it? If the people can't look to Parliament, they will look elsewhere. If we can't offer hope or its associates, we will be offering exactly the opposite: alienation. Failure to act would be a crime against society, a demonstration that we are incapable of mending that which we have broken. Now, I appreciate that the election of so many SNP members must have seemed to some honourable incumbents akin to an uprising.
Yeah.
I've heard it called a jocalypse now.
Jocalypse now, Boris.
And we may have ruffled a few feathers. Since we've got here, but I really want to extend a hand of cooperation around this House.
Yes.
Anyone who would like to work with us to address poverty, reverse the effects of austerity and start building for a future where we can do things like improve the health and well-being of all of the nations of the UK through encouraging physical activity will be more than welcome.
Yeah.
This isn't a one-time offer, nor a deal that ends at midnight. This is an offer that lasts. For those interested in taking society forward, work with us, and by God, we'll work with you.
Can I just say, unfortunately, it's going to be a 4-minute limit. Maria Miller.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate the Honourable Lady on a rather challenging maiden speech, perhaps not in the best traditions of the House, but I congratulate her on making sure that she puts her points over in a forceful way. Mr Deputy Speaker, I think I'm right in saying that this has got to be one of the most important things that we do, to look at the legacy of the Olympic Games in this debate today. And my noble friend Lord Coe opened the 2012 Olympics by saying, London 2012 will inspire a generation. And I think he was right. Our games inspire people not just in the UK, but abroad as well. And I think we should be very proud of that indeed. It was the very first legacy games, with the legacy, as my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, has said, built in from the outset. It challenged, I have to say, an outdated, crusty image of a faded Britain, and it demonstrated that after a great recession, Britain was open for business, once more thriving and leading the world, not only in sports, but through the Cultural Olympiad as well, culture and arts as well. It regenerated huge swathes of our capital city, and I believe gave us pride in our country. And it's the success of the London 2012 Olympics for Britain was not a success just for one political party or another, as the honourable member sitting on the front bench opposite might like to imply. I believe it was a success for the whole nation, because it brought our nation together. We presented ourselves to the world with confidence, passion, professionalism, and above all, fun. And I have to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm somewhat surprised that the opposition motion in front of the House today focuses in the way that it does. It rightly talks about the importance of Olympic legacy, yet the honourable gentleman in his opening statement seemed to talk about very little of that legacy itself. He talked really simply in terms of increasing participation in sport, which, whilst important in its own right, is only one part of that Olympic legacy which he should have been covering off in his speech. He fundamentally missed the true scope of the legacy of the event, and I believe that he should perhaps put that right later on. The motion tells the House that the government squandered the Olympic legacy bequeathed to it in 2010, some 2 years before the Games were actually held, when actually participation in sport has increased by 1.4 million people since the London bid was won in 2005. I fear the Shadow Minister is really breaking the first rule of his job, which is trying to score political points off the back of sports. It simply doesn't work, and he shouldn't do it. 3 observations that I would make in the short time that I've got available to me, Mr Deputy Speaker. I think we should continue to be proud and not pull apart the success that was London 2012. There was a lasting legacy built in from the start, and as we've heard, it's been hailed as a blueprint for future hosts by the IOC. I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
About building things in from the start to ensure a legacy, and would she therefore agree with me that the RFU have got things right to take advantage of the Rugby World Cup coming up by appointing a legacy group, which means that the advantages of the tournament will be seen in future years in exactly the same way as the honourable lady is describing about the Olympics?
couldn't have put it better myself, Mr Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend is absolutely right. I'd like to just move into a couple of other points which I believe are part of that legacy. It's the Cultural Olympics, as I have mentioned earlier on, increasing participation, as we've mentioned too, challenging the views of disabled people so that we view people for what they can do, not for what they can't. My honourable member, the member for Ruislip, brought up in an intervention the important role of volunteering, reversing a long-term decline which has started under a Labour government into an increasing success with more people putting themselves forward. If my honourable friend can forgive me, I think other members want to come in. Women's sport as well, we've touched on it briefly, Mr Deputy Speaker. Challenging the media and sponsors about the appeal of women's sport. Around 40% of UK medals were won by women, and the audience levels that were commanded by those events demonstrated the huge untapped appetite for mainstream coverage of women's sport. And I'd like to applaud the BBC and Sky Sport for the work that they're doing now, and I'm sure they'll continue to do in the future, to put women's sport at the forefront. London 2012 put Britain on the world stage. It promoted the regeneration of one of our poorest parts of our capital city. But honourable gentlemen and ladies today are right to say we need to carefully scrutinise the investment that's being used to increase participation in sport. We're putting a huge amount in, £1 billion into youth and community sport through to 2017 to create a sporting habit for life. And we need to make sure that we're holding the national governing bodies to account for the work, the money that they're doing and the work they're doing on our behalf.
Kate Hoey.
Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate the honourable member for Edinburgh and North Leith on her maiden speech. Can I welcome the Sports Minister too, and indeed the Secretary of State, to their roles, and I hope that the Sports Minister will continue the long tradition really of Sports Ministers working across political parties and carrying on to do that, and also that she will try and bring together, as many of us have tried over the years, to get the Department of Health, the Department of Home Office, the Department of Local Government and the Secretary of State's Department to work together, because together we can actually solve a lot of the problems. I'm sad that we've used the word squander in our motion, and I don't actually think that's a very sensible word, if I'm honest, about to use. This is a very, very difficult issue. Legacy is not something that happens overnight. Legacy is something that has to be worked at, and I think all of the people who've been involved in the Olympics knew that it was not going to, the increased participation was not going to simply happen just because a few people won a few gold medals. That's not how you do it. It's got to start from the bottom up.
We don't really get way. Very quickly, the Honourable Lady I know has a passionate interest in shooting sports. The one sport that wasn't mentioned by the Shadow Minister in his introduction was Peter Wilson's wonderful gold medal he had in clay pigeon shooting. Does the Honourable Lady recognise that fantastic win? But secondly, does she also feel that more could be done to introduce our young people to shooting sports? Well, I am a great supporter of shooting sports and the discipline it gives and so on, and I'm very, very pleased that the particular gold medalist that my honourable friend mentioned, because in fact he comes from an area which I know very well in Northern Ireland, and I know it brought great pleasure to people in Northern Ireland. I just want to say a few words about how I think we can actually get a legacy, and I want to point to London. And as many members will know, and some of them on this side of the House were not too happy that I have been the Mayor's Commissioner for Sport, I wanted very much to ensure that out of the Olympics there was a legacy for grassroots sport. And I have to genuinely congratulate the Honourable Member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, because when he became Mayor there wasn't a sports unit at City Hall. Grassroots sport wasn't important. There was something going on about the Olympics, but grassroots sports didn't really matter. And he has actually committed and made sure that we had some ring-fenced money out of which we were able to work with Sport England, work with local authorities, work with the London Marathon Trust, and bring together a coordinated approach to try and get London to speak as one voice, because that is one of the crucial problems, that when London wasn't speaking as one voice. And what has happened out of that as a result of all the money that's gone in, the £20 million, the extra £30 million in additional match funding, the investment in sports facilities, in our mobile swimming pools, the different sports right across London, we have seen that we are the only part of the United Kingdom where increase in participation has not gone down and has actually gone up. But that's not just
just by doing that alone is not going to solve the problem. We really do have to look at what makes it work. And of course, what we see, we have to get local authorities to see sport and recreation as a priority. Southwark, a Labour borough, has just decided to introduce free swimming. So local authorities can do more if there is the push and if there is the intention to actually make it happen. And I'm absolutely delighted that they've been able to do that. I want to see, I think it's very, very important that we look at our schools. And I want to remind members, because I was one of the people, I was a sports minister when the school sports coordinators were set up. But the reality is it was never meant to be long-term. It was meant to be something that raised the standard in schools so that the schools themselves would help to actually make sport and physical recreation a really important part of school. Now, what I really welcome is this ring-fenced money, the only money that goes to schools at ring-fenced, just over £8,000 to each primary school. In London alone, that brings in £15 million to be invested in our school sport. And if the schools work together, as they've been doing in some of our areas, that you can get a huge amount of money, a huge amount of effort and good things going on in the schools, in our 1,900 primary schools. I want to see... yes, I will give way.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. In the Education Committee report on school sport and the Olympic legacy in the last Parliament, one of the recommendations was that the woefully small amount of time that primary school teachers in particular in training receive in physical education should be extended. And I wonder whether the Honourable Lady would comment on that.
I think the training is important, and as a former physical education teacher, qualified teacher, when we did have physical education colleges that actually taught physical education in, I think, a very, very much better way than it's taught now. I think it's absolutely crucial. But our primary schools are important. But, you know, it's not just about money. It isn't. Money is hugely important, but it's about people, it's about motivation, it's about people wanting to get that enjoyment of sport into young people early on. And that is what we have to work towards. I also think one of the things that we're doing in London, which is really crucial, is when we get these major sports events that are absolutely important and bring millions of people overall into London, that we have to make sure, and the Mayor has made this happen, that no big sports event will come into London now without having to prove, the governing bodies have to prove what they're going to do for grassroots sport. What is going to be the legacy from each sporting event, so that it's not just a come in, all the people come along, have a great 1 or 2 days, and then nothing happens. And that's another very important thing. But the most important thing that I'm proud of in London is that we've now finally brought together all the, what would be called county sports partnerships outside London, proactives in London, together under something called London Sport. And London Sporting then wanted this to happen as well. We've now got a partnership right across London. Money, instead of people coming in and thinking, oh, we've got to go to all these different London boroughs, we're all going to be working together to make sure that the money goes a lot further. And it's absolutely crucial that that's done. So I don't think we should be negative, and I really genuinely think that sport is one of those issues where we should be able to have mature debates, not just playing statistics back and forward and ping-pong. I think we really should be able to work closely together, and I would suggest to the Secretary of State that one of the things he might do is, in government time, have a proper full debate in this House, so we don't have 3 or 4 minutes to sort of rush through things, have a proper debate where people can have a proper discourse and welcome the fact that sport does so much in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is a really important debate, because participation in sport is not just about improving elite sport and the success of our Olympians and our footballers and cricketers at the elite level. It not only just improves people's health and well-being, but we know, and all the studies show, that sport is incredibly important to often turning around the life chances of many young people, people who have been involved in crime, and people who have fallen out of education. It gives structure and confidence back to people, and that is why it is such an important part of the fabric of our society. And, of course, we should be very ambitious for increasing levels of participation in sport, and we should hope to see a boost in participation, particularly after the incredible success that was the London Olympic Games. And so we can look at the Sport England figures and say, for their most recent study on sports participation, and say, we'd like to be doing better. Our aspiration should be to be doing better. And as the Honourable Gentleman, the Shadow Minister, said at the beginning, there are some sports like swimming which are down, but there are other sports in the last 2 comparable years, like football and athletics. No, football, in the figures I've seen, football was up, athletics was up, cycling was up, rugby was up, cricket was up in the last 2 comparable years. So give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Honourable Gentleman for giving away. He's mentioned it. He's mentioned football there. And doesn't he think we've things to learn from other countries? I believe in Belgium that the aim is a 19 or 20-year-old will have touched the ball about 2 million times in football across the range of society, which is building quite a high pyramid that we're seeing in the Belgian national team coming forward at the moment because of what they're doing at grassroots. And we could and should be learning from other countries such as that.
I agree with much of what the Honourable Gentleman says. Last Friday I was in Folkestone to see the opening of the new 3G football pitch at Cheriton Road, and we want to see more investment in pitches like that. Now, the government has provided an additional £8 million to go into those sorts of facilities, but we should see more. And I agree with the Honourable Gentleman, Member for Rhondda, that with all the billions of pounds coming into football, can we not get more of that money coming into the grassroots? I think that is something we all want to see. Matthew Said's excellent book, Bounce, his analysis of sports participation is really clear. It is proximity to good coaches and good facilities and the opportunity to engage in those people, which increases the number of people that participate and makes it more likely we will find elite performers from almost whatever walk of life they come from. And it's a question of getting those combinations right. Now, the issue of participation, which the Secretary of State raised, is very important because the participation figures, as they are collected by the national sports bodies, are something of a blunt tool. You could have one person who participates in 3 sports who decides to concentrate on one and spends more time doing that one sport than doing the 3 before. That is a net drop in participation, even though the hours of sport may have gone up. So what we should be doing is targeting interventions to get people who do no sport at all to start doing something, and focusing on that intervention in some of the most deprived communities where people don't have access to facilities or coaches or the opportunities to participate. And that was an agenda that was set out, the Department is looking at, that was set out by the Right Honourable Gentleman Member for Bromsgrove, the previous Secretary of State, and I think will be an important step forward in looking at how we incentivise investment going in to get people that play no sport to play some sport. And also questioning whether voluntary groups and charities are better placed to access some of that funding, or should be able to access some of that funding, to tackle some of the harder to reach places than just the national governing bodies. Now, some of those organisations are currently supported by some of the national sporting bodies. The Rugby Union's HITS programme has done a fantastic job in supporting young offenders and refocusing their lives around sport. And KICS, the Premier League's programme, has done a fantastic job. There have been some excellent studies looking at the benefit of that in London and reducing crime and antisocial behaviour in programmes where those sporting programmes, the football programmes, were run. So I believe that should be our priority and our focus there. I believe school sport is important, but encouraging people to take part in sport outside of school is even more important. There will only be a certain number of hours in the school day, but participation outside of school is important. There's a lot of good work done by the School Sports Partnership, but it is that link between schools and sports clubs in the community that is very important. In my constituency,
on that point, last Friday in Hampshire there were 2,200 children taking part in the Hampshire Youth Games, but one of the best things to see was the link up between sports clubs who were volunteering and actually running the different sports, like Trojans Club in my constituency, who spent all day running the hockey.
Honourable Friend makes an excellent point. In my own constituency there is an organisation called the Shepway Sports Trust, which is independent of the council, is independent of the schools. It is supported by the Roger De Haan Charitable Trust with funding, but also seeks to find funding from other sporting bodies as well. But its primary purpose is to connect schools and sports clubs, to drive participation in sport outside of school, and to proactively go out and try and recruit new people to take part as coaches. Because you can have all the facilities in the world, but if you don't have the coaches to go out there and lead people through those programmes, then we won't get the most out of them. And it's that sort of coordinated approach that we need to see, with a focus on getting people who are currently outside of the support for funding for sport, participating in sport, people that have otherwise missed out. But I do think we should look at sports where there have been increases in levels of participation in the last couple of years, particularly the sports I mentioned earlier. Is that because of the way they invest in community facilities? Is it because of the way they link up sport in schools with sports in clubs? What lessons are there to be learnt, and how can we match that funding to increase participation? I think also, how can we look to receive funding from other areas of government's activity as well? Why shouldn't the Home Office be somewhere, an old place where people can go for funding to run sports programmes that are dealing with antisocial behaviour and crime in the community? Why can't the Justice Department also pay for some of the work delivered by programmes like HITS, turning around the lives of young offenders? The statistics are incredible from the reports that are done. 1 or 2 big successes, keeping one young offender from re-offending, almost pays for an entire year's programme in a community. These are relatively small amounts of money, and the investment, the return we get for the investment in community sport is enormous, and that should shape our strategy. Now, I've had a couple of extra minutes from intervention, so I'll call it a day there. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, it's good to see that the cross-party consensus that won us the Olympics is so alive this afternoon, and a bit of grumbling. Well, I'm not going to grumble about money going into East London for the Olympics, because me and my constituents loved the Olympics any more than would be grumbling about money going into Glasgow for the Commonwealth Games, because we love the Commonwealth Games. And we do hope, and I'm sure, that the ministers on the front bench would agree with me that part of the deal, when we all backed those things so unanimously previously, is that areas like mine that have not had the honour of hosting such facilities will get more of a priority in the coming years. And I look forward, as we go forward wanting various things, that the government ministers will be prompting and pushing to ensure that we get them. And I do hope as well, in this strategy that the government's now re-looking at, that the government will honestly look at the fact that pitch prices are a problem. They've gone up, and that is a problem that needs to be thought about and has to be addressed, because it's turning people away. I hope as well the government will admit the error. It was a mistake on school sports coordinators. It's honourable for new ministers to accept errors that were made in the past by others and change them. It was an error. It was a serious error. Something can be done about it now that would improve the situation, because there is a tail-off in schools because of it. And looking at how, with those with less income, which since the banking crisis, a lot of families have had less income, that means that the poorest in society, who spend an average, the lowest 20% in terms of income, between £2 and £4 per household per week on sport, they're disproportionately suffering from the lack of access. But it's worse than that. Street games, a charity I know the new sports minister has great affection for, and I hope will get more resource. Street games has produced an equity index on volunteering, which shows that the brilliance of volunteering also disproportionately benefits those from higher incomes in higher income areas, and disproportionately works against those in the lowest income areas. So the poorer you are, the less likely there will be volunteers, the less likely you'll be participating. And one of the key reasons why the BBC needs to be keeping all these major sports events free to view is because that's exactly the same population who does not pay to watch it with pay-per-view, and therefore gets further excluded from these major sporting triumphs such as the Olympics. That's so vital for this government department. Now the UK Sports Gold Series events series. The 70 events in the next 6 years that are doing the same thing. The government must give more of an emphasis and a push to that, in the way in which in Chorley, with Rugby League, the pop-up rugby was such a success with the Panthers, or street games when they went to across the country on Wimbledon with the pop-up tennis. And as well, the new-to-emerge Bassetlaw Sports Village, not yet there, but on its way, an athletics track, all-weather football stadium, giving the resource back where it's needed. And when we did it before, with girls' football at Manton Miners' Welfare, we saw the biggest increase in the football world with girls' participation. Give us the tools, give us the facilities, and the people will come forward to participate in sport. And finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, any of you out there looking in on these benches who hasn't participated in sport, the Parliamentary Mountaineering Club, we'll take you up in the hills. Anyone can participate. Do join us.
Mary Robinson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, for calling me to make my maiden speech in this debate. And I'm pleased to follow the Honourable Member for Edinburgh North and Leith, who spoke so eloquently in her maiden speech. It is a great honour and privilege to be here as a new member for Cheadle. Cheadle is a vibrant and beautiful constituency, situated within Greater Manchester and on the border with Cheshire. It is a constituency that values communities and volunteering, business and enterprise, parks and sport. At this point, Mr Deputy Speaker, I would like to pay tribute to my predecessor, Mark Hunter, who represented Cheadle for 10 years. As well as his party role here as Deputy Chief Whip, he will be remembered for his hard work in the constituency. And like his Liberal Democrat predecessor, Patsy Colton, He also used his maiden speech to highlight the need for a major relief road through the constituency. And so I'm delighted to be able to say that after waiting decades for this vital relief road to Manchester Airport, it is now off the drawing board and under construction. Mr Deputy Speaker, my constituency is made up of a number of villages and small towns. It has a long and interesting history, but before honourable members become concerned that I may be tempted to narrate it in its entirety, I am aware that my time is limited. My constituency stretches from Woodsmore, parts of Hazelgrove and Davenport, on the outskirts of Stockport, right down to Heald Green, Cheadle, and Woodford on the Cheshire border. Indeed, for some of my constituents, their feet may be in Stockport, but their hearts are still in Cheshire. Mr Deputy Speaker, the settlements of Cheadle and Bramhall date back to Doomsday records. And the village of Woodford has a proud history too. It was formerly the home of aircraft manufacturers Avro, and at its height in the Second World War, over 29,000 people were employed at the site, and over 20,000 aircraft manufactured there, including Lancaster bombers, Vulcans and Nimrods. Mr Deputy Speaker, communities are really important to me, and a great example of the community in action is in the Cheadle Civic Society. Formed more than 50 years ago, its aims are to encourage higher standards of architecture and planning in the village. And recently, its dedicated members and volunteers have invested more than £100,000 bringing new life to the village green. Indeed, it is our parks and clubs that the Olympic legacy is most clearly visible in through my area. From the cricket clubs of Cheadle and Woodford, receiving grants for improved facilities, to local cyclists benefiting from the excellent new BMX track in the award-winning Bruntwood Park. And our amateur football clubs are important too. Our amateur clubs include well-known teams such as Cheadle Town FC, who last season hosted the Russian under-19 team. 19 was a number we wish had been reflected in the score, as Cheadle was unluckily beaten 22-0. However, pride was restored when the home goalie was named man of the match. When asked why he thought the Russian team had won, he stated that the under-19s had the wind behind them. How unlucky it was that the wind turned around at half-time. Mr Speaker, I have a number of aims I want to achieve for my constituency. For example, there are many small businesses in the area and their enterprise needs to be encouraged. I am proud to represent Cheadle, where communities value their local parks, sports clubs and the facilities they provide. It is a great honour and a privilege to be here as the new member for Cheadle. Cheadle is a vibrant, beautiful constituency situated within... Sorry about that. Proud to be here representing Cheadle, where communities value their local parks, sports clubs and the facilities that they provide, and there is a great spirit of volunteering by people who give freely of their time. And this was demonstrated to great effect in the Games. As I serve the residents of Cheadle, I hope to support and promote the spirit of volunteering and community.
Seema Malhotra.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it is indeed a matter of pride to be able to follow the Honourable Member for Cheadle, who I believe has made an excellent speech and has spoken eloquently about her constituency, its character, its history, its needs, and I am sure that she will have a very successful Parliament in this House standing up for her constituency, and I congratulate her on her speech and on her election to this House. Mr Deputy Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak in this very important debate today, and not least to be able to pay tribute to Feltham's own Mo Farah, who I believe in not just his own success, but in also what he has done since his success in the Olympics and in other competitions, has shown his commitment to sport and excellence, which continues to inspire many in my constituency, those across Britain and across the world. Mr Deputy Speaker, we all recall the Olympics, the excitement, the expectation, the pride, how exciting it was to take part also as the Olympics torch travelled across the country, recognising it was truly a national achievement to win the Olympics. And this week is also National School Sports Week, which I believe is an opportunity to send out a very strong message about sport, about its importance for young people to participate in. And that's why it is indeed a sad matter in terms of the aspect of sports legacy from the Olympics, that we have seen participation decline in almost every region and across a range of sporting disciplines, a matter that has been raised consistently in this debate today. And it's certainly saddening that the School Sports Partnership had its funding cut, which I believe also impacted the ability of schools to participate in the same way in sports in my constituency. But last year it was a matter of pride also to be able to attend the launch of Motivate Hounslow, an important initiative which I believe shows the need to motivate, to encourage, to take part in innovations to bring about greater participation in sport. It was launched, an initiative launched with Mo Farah and indeed with his former PE teacher Alan Watkinson, who continues to play a very important part in sports participation in Hounslow and in my constituency. But I want to just raise a couple of issues today in the short time that I have remaining in this speech, to raise a couple of points in relation to the lack of a comprehensive strategy that has been raised with me. The feeling that in secondary schools particularly that sports provision is in decline, and there may be pockets of excellence, but it is not reaching all of our areas. We have also seen participation fall in poorer areas and with those who are more deprived. And I believe that this voice needs to be heard, and we need to hear much more from the government about how they are going to make sure there is a comprehensive and longer-term strategy to encourage participation that takes advantage of our school system to make sure that there is a strategy for those particularly aged 11 to 18 years old. And I also want to recognise today the work of the Youth Sports Trust, who have published a manifesto for PE and sports, and also this week launched their report, The Class of 2035, looking at young people's relationship with physical activity, the need to think about how the digital revolution can also be used to encourage PE and sports participation and empower young people to take part and responsibility for their own activity levels. So in conclusion, I want to just say, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this needs leadership from the top. We need the government to show that it's going to take responsibility so that we don't see a decline but we see an increase in the years ahead.
Boris Johnson.
Very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I want to say that I think this debate has been improving steadily as it has gone on, and I think members on both sides have been making actually some very sensible points. I want to pay particular tribute to the excellent maiden speech of my honourable friend, the member for Cheadle, and to the honourable member for Edinburgh North and Leith. I think excellent maiden speeches both, though I have to say I think that the language and the motion, I think, is unfortunate. I think most international observers would say that to say Britain has squandered the legacy of the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games is utterly nonsensical. I think most fair-minded people would say that there has never been an Olympic Games of modern times that has produced such a substantial legacy of every kind. And the reason I will give way with pleasure to my honourable friend.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. With the honourable member, when you're talking about this idea of squandering the legacy, cannot be true when you take into account the transport logistics and the amazing Olympic volunteers who were almost at the level of the absolute hero, Ben Parkinson, the torch carrier. And thankfully for Twickenham, for the Rugby World Cup, we are benefiting from some of those transport logistic teams and those volunteers. And therefore, would he agree that squandering is absolute rubbish?
Wholeheartedly agree that squandering is totally wrong. I think the reason the IOC have said what they've said about the blueprint that London offers to the rest of the world is because they've been around other Olympic cities, post-Olympic cities, and they've seen, as my right honourable friend the Secretary of State said, the Budley are sprouting from the athletics tracks, the Dust Bowl stadiums, and they go to the Olympic Park and they see the exact opposite. All 7 key venues with a long-term private sector solution and contractor. Since the park opened only a year ago, we've had 800,000 people go to the swimming pool. 600,000 have gone to the Vela Park, 600,000, I don't know why you haven't, 600,000 to the Copper Box, tens of thousands to the Lee Valley Hockey and the tennis centres, and as members have pointed out repeatedly, we are about the only Olympic city on record to have solved the problem of what to do with the stadium. We've got a long-term future for the stadium, in spite of the catastrophic errors that were made by the previous government. And there will be not only Premiership football, there will be rock concerts, there will be baseball, there will be rugby and all manner of entertainments. And this park is going to be, our park in East London is going to be a centre of sporting excitement for generations to come. And the Secretary of State has rightly listed all the procession of world championships in athletics, rugby, hockey, wheelchair rugby, swimming, and so on. And we are succeeding in getting people from the poorest boroughs in our country to play sport and to take part. 45,000 people have taken part in the Active People project on the park. 26,000 have enjoyed Motivate East, which is a programme to get disabled people more active in sport. And I am absolutely confident, as my honourable friend, she's my friend, the member for Vauxhall has rightly said, I am confident those numbers will continue to rise, because the area is changing out of all recognition. I'll give way with pleasure to my old friend.
That list of eulogy, but he also acknowledged the excellent work being done in engaging schools and clubs and putting them together at grassroots to make sure more grassroots sports is played by school children.
Absolutely. I completely acknowledge, and I acknowledge the work of the grassroots sports team as well. And much of this success flows from the increasing prosperity that we are seeing in East London and at that Stratford site. We already have the village complete and occupied, 4,800 new inhabitants. We have the largest green park in the UK for a century. 24,000 homes are going to be built on that site. Many of them low-cost homes, family homes, which would not have happened without the Olympics. We will have tens of thousands of new jobs as a result of the Olympicopolis project that my right honourable friend rightly identifies and which the government is rightly funding, in my view. And just this very morning, I'm happy to say in another capacity, I was privileged to give planning permission for a new tech hub in what we call Hackney Wick, Fish Island, where they're an absolutely beautiful structure that's going to echo the Victorian warehouses there and incorporate all kinds of artist studios and tech startups. It is inconceivable that that kind of private sector investment would have come to that part of London without the Olympics, and it is a phenomenal legacy. We have 2 university campuses going to the Stratford site, not just UCL, £270 million campus from UCL, but also, of course, Loughborough, one of the great sporting universities in the world, and their mission is to help local kids to take up sport. Because I totally agree with what the honourable member for Vauxhall has said. Taking up sport is not just a symptom of prosperity, it is a cause of prosperity, and that's why she and I have campaigned so hard on this issue. And I'm proud to say she's absolutely right. We have had a point that the right honourable member totally failed to concede. We have had 400,000 more people doing some kind of sport since 2012 in London. Sport is up. Sporting participation is up in London, as well as every other kind of legacy. The London Olympics and Paralympic Games of 2012 boosted sport across the city in which they were held. They are transforming East London and the lives of some of the poorest people in our society. They've left a legacy, as several members have rightly pointed out, of volunteering and engagement that we are continuing to support through Team London, and they've brought untold billions of investment to this country and to project an image of London and around the world that was so attractive and so exciting that for the 3rd year running we are going to achieve what we have never before achieved in my lifetime, and that is to be the #1 tourist destination in the world, knocking Paris, knocking New York off the number one.
Order, Christina Rees! Order, Mr. Johnson, you're back in the House. Your behaviour should be better than this. We expect more from you. The Mayor of London should do better. Christina Rees.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There is little doubt that the 2012 London Olympics inspired people, from the majesty of the opening ceremony featuring Britain's greatest artistic talent through to the astonishing achievements of our athletes and of the world's best sportspeople. It was impossible not to be inspired by the Games, as I was inspired when I went to the Munich Olympics as part of the GB youth team. I am passionate about sport and the opportunity it gives to our children. Yet the legacy, the ambition of inspiring a generation to be physically active and to get hooked on sport has not been realised. 3 conditions need to be met to encourage and enable people to be physically active: inspiration, access and infrastructure. Whilst there was no lack of inspiration present at and after the Olympics, the 2012 Games were held in the early years of Tory austerity. Against a backdrop of crushing local government budget cuts, a strangulation of budgets within DCMS and the channeling of lottery funding to support the Games themselves. Those other 2 conditions were missed. Across England, just as young people were being inspired to take up athletics, swimming, gymnastics, local councils were closing their doors on leisure facilities. The Conservatives and Liberal Democrats were in charge for the 2012 Olympics, but they were also in charge for the unprecedented degradation of sports infrastructure across England. So the consequence of a Tory policy of promoting the Olympic Games but cutting off access to physical activity has contributed to a worsening of public health statistics and the deprivation of opportunities for people to be engaged in sport and physical activity. How can people who've suffered hardest through austerity afford pitch fees, court fees, gym fees and equipment hire? How, as a consequence of this government tearing apart the welfare state, could people on the lowest incomes hope to access childcare in order for them to attend fitness classes or sports club activities? The lack of a coherent physical activity strategy during and after the Olympics demonstrates how the government walked away from a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to inspire and activate a generation. In Wales, during the same period that the previous UK government stripped local government bare, the Welsh Labour government protected council spending. This not only protected social care in contrast to what happened in England, but also sports and leisure centres. Protecting council budgets gave Welsh councils time to transform services. It gave time for leisure and sports centres to be turned into some cases from positive losses to making a profit for trusts and social enterprises to be formed. The results of the Welsh Government's continued support for its sport budget resulted in a record medal haul at the Glasgow Commonwealth Games. Wales won 36 medals in total, 20 bronze, 11 silver and 5 gold. More medals per capita than any nation. And alongside this, levels of physical activity have increased since the Olympic Games. The lesson of this contrasting picture on either side of Offa's Dyke is that if you invest in an event but cut away access and infrastructure to the activities promoted by that event, no positive legacy will be achieved. In Wales, partnerships between Welsh Government and the national governing bodies has led to a record number of 3G pitches being built, to multi-use leisure centre and learning centres opening in communities, and to creche facilities being located within sports and leisure and library services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just to help, if people could shave a little bit off, it would be very helpful. I'm not going to reduce the time, but any help we could get, we'll get everybody in. Stephen Hammond.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful for calling me in this debate, and I shall certainly listen to your stricture. I have, of course, the great speech here, but on that basis of points have already been made more eloquently by others, so I will make 2 points, if I may. First of all, it was a great privilege for me almost 10 years ago now, when I was early in this House, to be able to congratulate the then Secretary of State, Tessa Jowell, on getting the Olympics to London and working and saying that the work will be done on a cross-party basis for the legacy. Therefore, it is a disappointment to see the word squander in this. Partly because I think if anyone did any analysis in terms of the regeneration, my right honourable friend has already spoken about the cultural legacy, about some of the participation increase that we've seen, notwithstanding some of the falls more recently. No one would say that it's squandered. I think, as the Lord Coe said, it lit up the world and inspired a generation. The two serious points that perhaps the serious point I want to make is that if you look at the word squandered, if you want to take the word squandered, perhaps you should consider legacy itself. The 2 points I make to the Shadow Secretary State that didn't make in his speech. Firstly, legacy is not something that happens 2-3 years after an event. The legacy of this Games will be judged by whether we have champions in 2020, 2024 and 2028, because that is where the grassroots is coming from. And he is right, no, I'm about to make that point, he is right to talk about the fact that from 2005 and indeed from 2012, participation in sport grew, but from October 2014, we've started to see a tail off in that increase in participation. Those are the numbers actually from Sport England Active Participation Sport campaign. So whether he wants to query that, I'm not sure, but it is true. And therefore, the question we have to ask ourselves is about sustaining that legacy. There has been a build-up of that. And that is not only true about the Olympics. Many of you will know that I represent one of the greatest constituencies that is going to have a little tennis tournament next week. I remember being in this house being told time after time the legacy of that was that we weren't bringing champions forward, despite year-on-year money being spent by the LTA. I will give way.
In terms of participation and in terms of tennis, isn't it a disgrace that in my constituency, the Labour-run council closed the public tennis courts, then put money into private tennis courts that only the most affluent can afford? The Scottish Government is trying to improve access...
Order! Can I just say, please? Well, they're meant to be very short intervention. You can't just run out a list. I'm sure you've given the honourable gentleman. I'm trying to save time to get people in who's been waiting all day to speak. Stephen Hammond.
I'm grateful, Mr Deputy Speaker. I won't respond to the honourable lady because I've listened to your stricture. And my second point in my short speech was to get the press release in, obviously, partly because there is a legacy going on here, and I would have talked more about the legacy, but the legacy in Wimbledon, which is reflective of the legacy in Wimbledon, is the new floodlit BMX track which is being used, opened, a growing membership, the new beach volleyball courts opened in Wimbledon Park, a growing membership. So across London we are seeing, in contrast to a number of other places, a growing participation in sport, and I think that is part of the legacy that is coming from these Olympics.
Barbara Keeley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I want to talk about women in sport. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 212,000 fewer women participating in sport since 2012, and that's a real issue because we already had a gender gap, a wide gender gap. There are 1.8 million fewer women playing sport once a week compared to the number of men, and 80% of women don't get enough exercise for their health. That's the reason this is a serious issue. That's the reason we should be discussing this today. Even before the recent falls in participation, there were reasons to be concerned about this. So nationally, the figures of 40% of men participating in sport on a weekly basis compared to 30% of women. But these figures are much lower in some part of the country. It's all right for the honourable gentleman opposite to talk about London. It's not the same in Greater Manchester. It's not the same in Salford. Figures for women's participation there are only 29% and 24%, so very low in some parts of the country. And it will lead, as my honourable friend has said earlier, to diabetes, to coronary heart disease and to stroke. And that's the reason this is a serious issue. A number of barriers have been identified, as the Secretary of State has said, to increasing female participation, including practical, personal, social and cultural issues, but also the financial reasons just laid out so well by my honourable friend, the member for Neath. I do want to mention the work of the All-Party Group on Women's Sport and Fitness, which I co-chair with Baroness Tanny Gray-Thompson. One of the three main aims of that group is to investigate ways to increase participation of girls and women in sport and reduce those barriers to participation. And can I mention, Mr Deputy Speaker, the first meeting of the All-Party Group is next Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. and I urge honourable members to attend if they can and to join the group if they care about this issue. I do want to congratulate the new Sports Minister on her role. I know she cares about the issues I am talking about. She was a member of the all-party group in the last Parliament, and she said that the government have a sports strategy that's very much out of date and that she's going to rip it up and start again, and I hope she does. Can I just mention a couple of things that I think if she's ripping up the strategy and starting again, she might want to think about? Unequal funding is a key issue running from school sport through to the unequal pay and poor sponsorship levels for elite women's sport. Yesterday was the 43rd birthday of the Title IX legislation of the United States, landmark civil rights law which prohibits gender discrimination in any educational programme or activity which receives federal support. And that's been law since the 23rd of June 1972. And it's famous for the transformative effects that funding had on girls and women's athletics. The US has the highest levels of participation of girls in sport in the world, largely due to Title IX bringing equal funding for girls and women in sport. And figures for that show that girls and women's participation in sports increased by 990% in high schools and 560% at college level since that law was passed. In this country, though, we don't have that. We have very poor media coverage of women's sport, and we have lack of sponsorship. And the committee which the Secretary of State chaired looked at those issues, but we have to do something about it. So the sports strategy must include working with the media to ensure better coverage of women's events. And finally, to pay and sponsorship. The pay levels for women footballers playing in the Women's Super League and in international competitions are very low, and probably a surprise to many. The majority of the centrally contracted players earn about £20,000 from their clubs, but there are players in the Women's Super League who are on as little as £50 a week. Those who are tempted to comment on the standard of women's football need to think about that low level of rewards. We won the Women's Rugby World Cup with a team that were not even paid professionally. Nearly all of them had other jobs. How could any of us train and win at international level when we had other jobs to do? There are so many other issues that we could be talking about, Mr Deputy Speaker. They're going to be explored, I hope, in other debates. I think that's a very sound idea. We will definitely explore them at future meetings of the All-Party Group.
David Rutley.
Speaker, I'd also like to pay tribute to the wonderful maiden speeches given by the Honourable Member for Edinburgh North and Leith, and my honourable friend, the Member for Cheadle. And she's done tremendous work to get here, and I pay tribute to that. Yeah. I can't claim to be an elite athlete, but along with the member for Bassetlaw, I am proud to represent what I believe is the peak of all party parliamentary groups by being the co-chair of the Mountaineering all-party parliamentary group. And I think that it is vitally important that as we look at the debate today and the motion today, that yes, of course we should be concerned about levels of sports participation. But the member for Rhondda has missed a point, I think, and a real opportunity by focusing and calling on the government to boost participation in traditionally defined sports as its primary focus. Of course this is important, but the real focus should be, and indeed needs to be, about getting people physically active, helping them to be less physically inactive. That has to be the focus, and that can only be achieved, I believe, by looking at a much broader definition of sport that includes wider views on recreation, particularly outdoor recreation. It's clearly time to think more broadly. My honourable friend, the Minister for Sport, has been on a heroic journey to climb Cotopaxi in Ecuador, where I know that she developed a greater love, maybe that's too strong a word, for the outdoors. But I think she understands, like many of us here, that there's real importance with outdoor recreation. And here's why. It leads to improved activity rates. 30% of the UK population is inactive. In Scandinavia, that's only 8% because they have a broader sense of getting active outdoors. In the Moving More, Living More document produced by the Department of Health, the costs associated with physical inactivity come to £20 billion. We should all have an interest in tackling that huge challenge. And it's clear that there are big health and well-being benefits as well, whether that's working with Age UK in East Cheshire or the Cheshire East Ramblers, where there are 700 members. That's clear to all those who participate. Because it's clear to all of us who are involved with the outdoors that there's a vast blue and green gym outside of this place that's available to nearly all of us if we just make that extra effort. And in fact, the benefits are clear as well, because it will also benefit another important subject, which is the rural economy. And in Reconomics, a report from the Sport and Recreation Alliance, there's going to be a £21 billion boost from outdoor recreation to the rural economy. So, I think that there is good news here. There is a clear opportunity, and there's progress that's being made. I've already indicated the fact that there's cross-party support, clear cross-party support, to make further progress here. We've had extensive debates in Parliament on this particular subject, notably one on the 20th of September, where the member for Ogmore made an impassioned debate, and many people have joined in as well. There's a coalition of interested parties in moving this forward, from the BMC, the Ramblers, the Youth Hostel Association and the Outdoor Industry Association, wanting to push forward an agenda. And in fact, last year before the election, have put forward a proposal, 6 key proposals for the government to take forward, from access through to opportunities for young people, but more than anything, a clear focus, calling for a long-term strategy for outdoor recreation that's cross-departmental, that sits alongside, or even better, is integrated with the government's successful sports strategy. And I think it was really refreshing to see how different departments from DCMS, from Health and from DEFRA are working together in this cause. We have an outstanding sports minister. I give her every vote of confidence in the work she does. Please remember this broader definition of sport and recreation in the work she does. Thank you.
Stephen Kinnan. Mr. Speaker, many thanks for allowing me to participate in this debate today. I do so as a keen sportsman myself and a true believer in sport as an essential element of building stronger communities, improving public health outcomes and teaching our young people the value of team ethics and fair play. In my younger days, I played rugby for London Welsh at junior level and for my college at university. Clearly, the motivation for doing so was partly that I was doing my constitutional and patriotic duty as a Welshman. But of course, it was also based on my love of sport as a critically important feature of Welsh culture and identity. In my constituency, I see every weekend the power of rugby to bring our communities together across generations. And of course, rugby is just one example of the power of sport as a unifying force for good. It is against this backdrop that I must express my deepest regret for the failure of the coalition government to build on the Olympic legacy. The fact of the matter is that the 2012 Olympics created a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to improve the fitness levels of this country's children and young people, but that opportunity was squandered by the coalition government when it decided to scrap Labour's school sports partnerships. Mr. Speaker, Labour's school sports partnerships played a critically important role in enabling primary school children to do competitive sport, and the decision to scrap them has led directly to the proportion of pupils doing 2 hours of sport a week collapsing from 90% under Labour to 50% under the last government. Cuts to local authority budgets have also hit leisure centres and playing fields hard. In Wales, the £1.5 billion cut to the block grant has had a deeply damaging effect. In my own constituency, Cummer Community Pool is threatened with closure, much to the despair of the local community, who are fighting hard to find a way to keep their pool that plays a critically important role in community life and public health open. This government must do better than its previous incarnation. The last 5 years saw a lack of strategy, piecemeal initiatives and announcements, and an absence of joined-up thinking. The coalition government's sports strategy can best be described as a litany of failure, with some of the lowlights including scrapping Labour's target for school children to do at least 2 hours of PE and sport in school each week, undermining Labour's successful school sports partnership, which were helping more children to do sport, watering down regulations on school playing fields, failing to carry out an audit of sports and recreation facilities available to local communities across the country, and failing to capitalise on the spirit and enthusiasm of the volunteer games makers. Mr. Speaker, the concerns that I'm expressing today are not narrow party political points. On the contrary, they are felt by a wide range of stakeholders, including the Olympic gold medalist Darren Campbell, who said back in 2013, "I have grave concerns that cutting the funding for School Sports Partnerships network will have a hugely negative impact on the sporting opportunities that are available to our young people." And Chris Dunn, head teacher of Langdon Park School in Tower Hamlets, London, who described the government's decision as an enormously destructive act verging on vandalism, and said it was a tragedy that sporting opportunities had been cut back dramatically after the Games. Mr Deputy Speaker, the seductive vision was that 9.3 billion invested in the Games would not only hasten the regeneration of a neglected corner of East London and unlock a host of other benefits, but would also act as a corrective in Whitehall to the attitude of politicians towards sport. No longer would sport be left at the back of the policy queue when it came to funding discussions. Instead, it would be incorporated into policies on fighting obesity, tackling crime, boosting educational achievement and bringing communities together. Fast forward to 2015, and the fact of the matter is that a properly integrated, properly funded, cross-departmental plan for sport and well-being remains as frustratingly elusive as ever. And meanwhile, childhood obesity rates continue to rise. PE in schools continue to decline. Provision of facilities remains frustratingly patchy. And participation figures suggest a widening gap between the sporting haves and have-nots.
Extremely grateful. Mr Clive Efford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Just like to make it clear at the outset that our reference in our motion is to sports participation, and we bid for the Olympics because we understood all the wider aspects of the success of the Olympics. So we've had a wide-ranging debate, and there's some very interesting speeches. Can I start off by congratulating the honourable member for Edinburgh and Edinburgh North and Leith on her maiden speech. She questioned whether there was a legacy from the Olympic Games for Scotland, but I think if she goes back and checks the figures, that she will find there was a considerable spin-off from the Olympic Games. But the purpose of this debate today is to find out how we can all benefit more widely in that. We also heard a maiden speech from the honourable member for Cheadle, and she spoke very fondly and very passionately about her constituency, and I'm sure she will be a fine champion of her local residents and her constituents in the years to come. Mr Speaker, there were a number of well-informed speeches during this debate. The honourable lady, the member for Basingstoke, a former Secretary of State herself, spoke about the wider generation issues, and I found nothing in her speech that I disagreed with. I think absolutely the Olympic Games will continue to benefit more widely on a whole range of issues that go beyond just sport, and that's one of the reasons why investing and bidding for these major sporting events is so essential for the country. Yes, I will give way to my own President.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Whilst we are discussing participation, I wonder if my honourable friend would also take the opportunity to praise those who enable others to participate in sport, those who drive the buses, cut the grass, make the food and drink, carry the bags week after week, as they do in rugby clubs up and down my constituency for many, many generations. Don't they perform a vital role too?
Well, absolutely, and actually there were a number of people who made points, particularly the honourable member for Folkestone and Hythe, and my honourable friend, the member for Vauxhall, the honourable member for Bassetlaw, specifically made reference to people at the grassroots of sport, and I couldn't agree more with my honourable friend, because I think it's time we empowered those people at the grassroots of sport. These are the people who do the heavy lifting. They make a real difference within our communities. They know where the resources can be put to make the biggest difference, and I think it's time that we had a long-term strategy for sport that empowered these people at local level, allowed them to make decisions about how resources are used and where they are targeted, give them an oversight of local development plans for sport. And when we use the term sport, it's important to remember we're not just talking about sporting activities, we are talking about physical activities of all kinds. It was a point that I think was made very well by one of the contributions during the debate. My honourable friend for Feltham and Heston, I agree with it. She called for a comprehensive plan for sport, a long-term plan. And I think when we talk to people who are involved at the grassroots, the one thing that they do consistently say is that they want an end to the stop-start sort of approach that they get from politicians. And when they criticise all of us in that, not just the current government. So what we do need to have, as many people ask for, is a long-term plan for sport where we can agree perhaps across all sides of this House on how we can take things forward and how we can engage with those people at the grassroots. Because what we've had in the past, the only consistency we've had, unfortunately, and this is a fact, whether people like it or not, is a consistent run of bad figures in terms of participation since 2012-13. And our motion focused on that performance, and it's that performance that we are talking about here today. Participation on the back of winning the Olympics went up by 1.8 million people from 2005 to 2012. But since that date, participation figures have been going backwards. And it's no good, honourable members, coming to this House and saying, look at all the... I certainly will. I look at all the figures that there are for transport, for regeneration, for jobs. We accept all of that. We're not criticising that side of it. But the one thing that one of the targets for winning the Olympic Games was to drive up participation. That works on the back of winning the bid from 2005 to 2012. But under this government's watch, since 2012, the performance has not been good enough. I give way.
I'm grateful to the honourable member for giving one. I actually think he's saying some very sensible things, but would he not, in all candour and honesty, and intellectual honesty, admit that actually, even since the 2012 Games in London, there has been a continual increase in sporting participation?
I accept that there's been a boost in London. The figures are up in London, but we're looking at the overall figures. But I would say to the honourable gentleman, there are issues underlying this that we do need to look at, which was highlighted by my honourable friend for Worsley and Eccles, which is that the figures for women participation is down, but disabilities are down. There are some important issues that we need to address. Now, if we look at the survey that was recently done by the Chief and Cultural Leisure Officers Association for this is local government leisure officers responding, 70% of them responded saying that local authorities were looking to recover all or part of their costs through fees and charges. Now, when we look at the sports that have been worst affected by in the participation figures, they tend to be the figures that rely heavily on local government facilities. Things like gym, exercise, dance, swimming, football, cricket. And so the impact there is bound to be more severe on people who rely on those sorts of services, namely those people from lower income households. Nearly 500,000 fewer people are participating in sport now than in 2012. And it's that form of social exclusion that we should be addressing. Now, I accept what the Minister has said. I'm sure she is absolutely earnest. She has said that the figures are not good enough, that the government's got to accept part of the blame. Sport England have said the figures are disastrous. Now, we can bandy backwards and forwards all of the figures, but what we have to accept is what people are looking for here is consistency. And all they've had consistent so far is bad figures year after year after year since 2012. Now, we need to work together in order to take this forward. So I really wish her all the best in convincing her colleagues on her side of the House to give priority to sport in the future. But I have to say that previous colleagues failed woefully, and I wish her all the best, and I'll be there supporting her all the way if she can convince them that we need to have a cross-government, long-term plan for sport that we can all work towards. We need to empower the people who do the heavy lifting, the coaches, the PE teachers, school games organisers, the volunteers, the people who run the clubs, the classes, academics, businesses, local authorities, county sports partnerships. And incidentally, if anyone recognises any of this, it's similar to the issues that Steve Hilton was raising only recently. Only I wrote it all down a year ago. And so sport governing bodies have a role to play. They have nothing to fear from being part of a strategy that's increasing overall participation, as they will be then fishing in a much bigger pool of talent for the next generation of elite athletes. We need a long-term plan where policy doesn't change every time we have a bad set of figures or the minister changes. We need to empower the people at the grassroots and let them tailor what goes on in our areas to meet local needs. Let them oversee local sports plans. Let's trust them because they can do it. So let's put the failures behind us. Let's do what people out there want us to do. Let's trust them and set out a long-term plan that we can all work towards and get our nation healthy, happy and active.
Yeah. To reply to the debate, I call the Minister for Sport, Tracy Crouch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This has, on the whole, been an excellent debate this afternoon. Excellent not just because of the contributions by colleagues, which I shall turn to shortly, but because, despite the attempt by the opposition to say otherwise, we have a good story to tell on London 2012 and the legacy from it. I will very briefly turn to the 13 contributions from the floor of the House. And I'd like to, first of all, start off by congratulating the Honourable Lady for Edinburgh North and Leith on her excellent maiden speech. I'm very fond of Edinburgh, which has a much sporting heritage to be very proud of. My right honourable friend for Basingstoke, as a former Secretary of State, brings real expertise and knowledge to this debate. And I'd like to pay particular tribute to her and, indeed, my predecessor on progressing women in sport, which she was right to say that the Olympics started that process. The Honourable Lady for Vauxhall, who was of course the first female sports minister, I'm merely the third, gave a brilliantly measured speech, and I can reassure her that there will be a proper cross-departmental approach to the strategy going forward, and I certainly share her passion on increasing grassroots sport. My honourable friend for Folkestone and Hythe spoke incredibly well. I'm hoping if I say wonderfully nice things about his excellent speech that he'll be very kind to me now that he's been re-elected to the Select Committee. The Honourable Gentleman for Bassetlaw is incredibly passionate about sport. I know how passionate he is, and he is indeed a man of great foresight, as we spent 21 odd days climbing a volcano for charity, where he lobbied me then on the facilities for his constituency, 12 months before I was made a minister. I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend for Cheadle on her maiden speech, and I was delighted to hear her story about Cheadle Town Football Club and their scoreline, which I believe was founded as Grasmere Rovers. She should not worry about the 22-0 drubbing. I've been a manager where we've won by a similar scoreline, but I've also been a player where we've lost by the same scoreline. Both are actually equally embarrassing. The Honourable Lady for Feltham and Heston, I thought, made some very interesting comments. I know she's been in post for a while now, but I feel I must pay tribute to her late predecessor, Alan Keane, who also sat on the Select Committee and was a real advocate for sport, and she's picked up his baton wonderfully. My honourable friend for Uxbridge, of course, made an excellent speech about a legacy that he has helped deliver, and he gave us, as Mayor of London, a memorable Games, and he's right to be incredibly proud of all that the Olympics and the Paralympics delivered. And the Honourable Lady for Neath was right to talk about the link between physical activity and health outcomes. My honourable friend for Wimbledon was right to point out the long tail of legacy and participation, and those inspired in London 2012 may not yet even be out of primary school, so I thought his points were well made. I've worked incredibly closely with the Honourable Lady for Worsley and Eccles South on the issue of women's sport. She raised some very important issues. There has been progress, but the challenges do remain, and I look forward to working with her on those. And my honourable friend for Macclesfield is a fantastic advocate for outdoor recreation, but it is his fault that my knees have still not yet recovered from cotopaxi. And finally, the honourable gentleman for Aberavon focused on school sport, but I can assure you that this government has committed to funding the primary PE and school sport premium for a further 4 years, something that Labour hasn't done. And furthermore, an independent assessment has shown that 96% of schools reported improvements in pupils' fitness, and 91% observed an increase in the quality of PE teaching. Mr. Speaker, if unnecessary attempts at political point scoring were an Olympic sport, the honourable gentleman for the Rhondda would win gold every time. He has done his best to impugn the legacy of London 2012, but the simple truth is that we have a great deal to be proud of, and it is a shame that the hitherto consensus has this afternoon been shattered. I will come to participation shortly, but the legacy is more than that. There is the legacy of the park, the village, business, volunteers, and of course the collective knowledge accumulated by those who delivered the games. The park is outstanding, with wonderful venues which are open to the public to enjoy. The Olympic Stadium has an exciting and sustainable future, and unlike so many previous host cities, there are no white elephants from London 2012. I don't have much time, so I'm sorry. And I do want to turn to participation. That's very kind, but I do want to focus on participation. I just also want to point out, and it's been mentioned before, that the London 2012 Games were the perfect showcase for the skills of our people and our businesses, which led to £14.2 billion of trade and investment benefits to the UK. British business has already won £60 million worth of contracts for the Rio 2016 Games, with up to another £100 million to come. And around 200 people who worked at London 2012 are helping to deliver the European Games in Baku and are assisting Rio in their preparations. If the honourable gentleman be patient, I will be turning to participation shortly. And as the Secretary of State said in his contribution earlier, the Game Maker Star volunteers have become a fixture at major sporting events. London 2012 changed the perception of volunteering, and the nation has embraced it, a direct legacy that appears to have been forgotten by the opposition. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me turn to participation. I'm quite happy to have an open and honest debate on this. The fact is that we have 1.4 million people playing sport than in 2005. And, before the opposition say anything, we've seen sport participation increase by 300,000 since October 2010. But this is not enough. Simple as that. London 2012 has, without doubt, inspired many people to get involved in Olympic and Paralympic sports. There's been an increase in the number of people doing athletics, cycling, archery, judo, sailing, and many others. But let's not forget, inspiration and measurement do not always run concurrently. The girls I met in my local boxing gym are in that ring because of Nicola Adams. They're not measured on any survey because they're under 14. We will have examples like that from all our own constituencies. The strapline of London 2012 was Inspire a Generation. The participation results show that our 16 to 25-year-olds are on the whole steady. That is good, but it's not good enough. I made it very clear when the last active people results were issued a couple of weeks ago that I am not happy with the decline in the number of people participating in sport. But let's be clear, the last time an all-encompassing sports strategy was drawn up was in 2002. It has been the template for sport delivery since then. Clearly, as the opposition themselves have admitted to today, their strategy is not delivering. We have been working, this government has been working on a strategy that was delivered in 2002. That is no longer fit for purpose. So, Mr. Speaker, I have ripped up the old strategy, and before recess, I shall publish a consultation on a brand new sports strategy. It is a sports strategy which will reform the way we deliver sport in this country, and I'm sure the opposition will embrace this opportunity to revive the consensus that helped deliver such a successful Games. Mr. Speaker, we are absolutely committed to continuing to make the most of the opportunities London 2012 gave us and make sure that generations to come benefit from that fantastic summer 3 years ago. It is unfortunate that through the wording of the motion, the opposition sought to denigrate the legacy of London 2012 today, and it is for that reason that we shall oppose this motion this evening.
Order. The question is, as on the order paper, as many as other opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Aye. Division. Clear the lobby.
Order. The question is as on the order paper. As many as have their opinion say aye. Aye. Will the contrary no? No. Tellers for the ayes. Tom Blenkinsop and Phil Wilson. Tellers for the noes. Jackie Doyle-Price and Guy Opperman. Stop the doors! Order! Order!
The ayes to the right, 250. The noes to the left, 309.
The ayes to the right, 250. The noes to the left, 309. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. Order.